kills me, makes me feel alive. Yeah, I've been losing sleep, dreaming about the things that we could be. Baby, I've been praying hard, said no more counting dollars, we'll be counting stars. Lately, I've been losing sleep, dreaming about the things that we could be. Baby, I've been praying hard, said no more counting dollars, we'll be counting stars. Hey. I feel your love and I feel it burn down this river every turn. Hope is our four-letter word. Make that money, watch it burn. Old, but I'm not that old. Young, but I'm not that bold. I don't think the world is sold. I'm just doing what we're told. And I feel something so.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Our program is about to begin.
I couldn't lie. Everything that drowns me makes me wanna fly. Yeah, I've been losing sleep, dreaming about the things that we could be. Baby, I've been praying hard, said no more counting dollars, we'll be counting stars. Lately, I've been losing sleep, dreaming about the things that we could be. But baby, I've been praying hard, said no more counting dollars, we'll be counting stars. Oh, take that money, watch it burn, sink in the river, the lessons I learned. Take that money, watch it burn, sink in the river, the lessons I learned. Take that money, watch it burn, sink in the river, the lessons I learned. Take that money, watch it burn, sink in the river, the lessons I learned. Everything that kills me makes me feel alive. Yeah, I've been losing sleep, dreaming about the things that we could be. Baby, I've been praying hard, said no more counting dollars, we'll be counting stars. Lately, I've been losing sleep, dreaming about the things that we could be.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage Ben Golub.
Hey everybody, welcome to day 2 of DockerCon. Did you have fun yesterday? Yeah, no, I had a blast. And as you recall, we started things off by asking everybody to help us achieve something that's really, I think, very, very, very important for our industry, which is to make news situation, some amazing tweets. We actually were the #3 top trending topic. So congratulations, everybody. Unfortunately, Taylor Swift managed to take on Apple and thereby combine pop culture and tech in the same day. So we lost out to Taylor Swift, but I think today we can do even better. So hey, thank you all for that. We tried to learn a lot between the last DockerCon and this DockerCon. And I think for the most part, a lot of things went really well. There was one tradition that we had at the last DockerCon that we forgot to implement yesterday, and so I want to resurrect it. Namely, giving an offering to the demo gods. So I hope that after yesterday, we more than appease them, but we apologize, gods. Please do not smite us again today. All right. So as discussed yesterday, the theme of this DockerCon really is all about Docker in production and making sure that Docker in production solves a multifaceted problem. And we've got to make Docker work at multiple different levels. It's got to work for individuals. It's got to work for developers. It's got to work for the ecosystem. It's got to work for people who are in ops, people who are in development, people who are in DevOps. And it's got to work across a bunch of different platforms, a bunch of different use cases. Obviously, a pretty difficult problem to solve. As you recall, Solomon said, hey, if we got a multi-level problem, multi-dimensional problem, really the way to attack that is by addressing it in layers, addressing it in levels. And laid out a framework where you have and as we bring up the people over the next 2 hours, you're going to see solutions around building, solutions around shipping, solutions around running that integrate the tools that we talked about yesterday. So you'll see activity around how we integrate the developer platform. You'll see how we integrate trusted registries and official repositories and access policies. And you'll see how we integrate great tools like Swarm and Compose, as well as third-party tools like Mesos and ECS into complete solutions. Now, I talked about complete solutions. Complete solutions are, of course, partly a matter of technology, but it's also a matter of making sure that things are delivered in a manner that works in production. And so for us, working in production not only means that we have great individual solutions, we want to make sure that they work together both on-premise as well as in the cloud. We want to make sure that all of these solutions, of course, work well together, but work well separately. We want to make sure that these are delivered with commercial support. We want to make sure that they're available through channels and through partners. And finally, that they're priced and packaged in a way that enables easy adoption. So, a big set of goals for us as a company, a big set of goals for us as a community to try and deliver. But fortunately, we've got amazing people together to help us deliver this. And one of those amazing people is a person that we brought into the Docker family about 6 months ago. This is our Senior Vice President of Engineering, Marianna Tessel. Before I invite her up on stage, I'm going to embarrass her a little bit. Marianna is a tremendous individual. She comes to us with a really storied career that includes places like VMware and General Magic. But what I think sold all of us on her is one of the first things she did in her career was that she was a captain in an elite military unit around computing. And so she has literally had to deliver code while under fire. And I can't think of anything that makes somebody more qualified to work at Docker than that. So please, Marianna, if you will come and join me up on stage.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Ben. Hi, everybody. Hope you're enjoying DockerCon. I certainly having a tremendous time here. And we talked about Docker, how it started from a project and went all the way to a movement. And Ben talked about in the cloud and on-prem and all these different form factors for Docker. And things kind of move fast in the tech industry, and there's always surprises. And I found one of these surprises actually here yesterday, just across the street from the hotel. And I wanted to share that with you. Here's another proof that Docker is a movement. Isn't that amazing? Go check it out. I really want to talk to you about Docker Hub today. But before I do, I would like to give a big shout out to the engineering and product team at Docker that not only are amazing, very talented individuals that work together with the community to deliver this amazing software, but also extremely passionate about what they do and about you, the users. So big thank you for the team. Back talking about Docker Hub. Docker Hub is a cloud service, a Docker cloud service, basically a Docker SAS, where you can publish and discover images and repositories, and where teams can collaborate in an application workflow and automate around it. Docker Hub was launched exactly 12 months ago at DockerCon in June 2014. And let's take a look at what happened since. This actually exceeded any of our wildest expectations. We have 240,000 users of Docker Hub, over 150,000 repos, an amazing 500 million pools of images. One of these most popular images or repos are what we called official repos. And as you can see, they have many of the software components that you need today to deliver your applications. These are extremely popular repos. We have over 60 million pools out of images for the, images of these repos. And we continue to add repos to the official images. So if you have special requests, come tell us, or check often because we do add lots of repos. I've also mentioned that Docker Hub is used in your development to production workflow for many companies. This is what we call the build ship part of the process, where you can take your containers and images all the way from development to QA to production. And for many companies, Docker Hub plays a very central piece and role in this workflow. To be exact, there are 13,000 organizations that use Docker Hub today this way. Well, this slide was a bit too small to fit 13,000, but I did fit few logos here. As you can see, they go across the industries. There are big companies, small companies, all sorts of organizations that rely today on Docker Hub. I want to tell you more about how this is being used, but I'm thinking, who is better to do that than actually an actual customer? Business Insider is one of these customers. Business Insider is the #1 ranked business news site on the internet. And I am extremely pleased to welcome today the Director of DevOps for Business Insider, Mr. Chris Buckley.
Thank you very much, Marianna. So my name is Chris Buckley. I'm the Director of DevOps at Business Insider. We are the largest business news site in the world. I've been working in Linux and systems administration in LAMP-based systems for around 14 years. The Business Insider infrastructure is a mixture of bare metal and AWS, based on PHP, Go, MongoDB, Puppet, and of course Docker. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the journey of Business Insider, how we started using Docker. So the first question is, why Docker at BI? Well, because it was fun. You know, FreeBSD jails, Linux containers have been around for a long time. But Docker was a great way for us to really start playing with things at BI. We quickly saw a lot of opportunities for applications, things like local development environments, and keeping consistent environments from local to dev to QA to prod, hopefully getting rid of the whole it works on my laptop paradigm. And we also saw some opportunities in isolating applications that we have in a monolithic code base running on shared infrastructure. So our first steps, we started small. We started using temporary containers to build and ship code from Jenkins. It allowed us to keep the same environment, the same software versions, everything during the build as when we're running in production. no matter where the build was actually run. So we could have a container running somewhere over here, building code, production over here, and we could guarantee that we had the same software stack. So then we decided to look at some long-running applications. We had several applications running on the same cluster, using the same dependencies, and we were seeing memcache, key value clashes, APC opcode clashes, and it was causing some really strange behavior with some of our applications. So we thought that isolated containers could really fix this problem. But we had a lot of questions, right? You know, how do we ship the containers? We have them, how do we ship them? Do we add the code inside the container? Do we mount it as a volume? How do we manage the container in case of failure or even graceful exits? And we also have a heavily puppetized infrastructure. We've spent a lot of time building this. The workflow is built around applying updates as code, Puppet server agent using Hiera. But we thought, let's give it a shot. So these are some of the decisions that we made. We decided to mount the volumes, mount the code in volumes to the containers. We decided to continue to use Capistrano and Jenkins with temporary Docker containers to build and ship the code. And we have long-standing containers running as Linux services using initd, upstart, that kind of stuff. And it worked, sort of. You know, we had some problems, but we got our first production application out on Docker, and it worked really well to solve the problems with the clashes that we had. And we all use Docker Hub as a central repository for all of our images, so we could build it, ship it, and pull it from anywhere. But putting it back to development was a little bit more difficult than we first anticipated. So here we have some lessons that we learned at Business Insider with Docker. The first one was that we should probably build for local. You know, building for production first was this really beautiful, grandiose idea, but it was a little bit misguided on our part. And porting it backwards to the devs wasn't the right path for us to take. And it actually became a bottleneck for our devs to start writing code. So we started looking around, and we found Fig, which is now Docker Compose, and it was perfect for our needs. You know, we have a complete stack defined in YAML, links, ports, volumes, environment variables, all in the one place. And we could either build the container from a Docker file, or we could pull it from Docker Hub, which we do a bit of both. And if you see on the left here, this is actually a complete stack of a development environment for our CMS system with multiple containers, links, environment variables, all that kind of stuff. One of the big wins that we had in using Docker, particularly for local dev, was the time that it got to ramp someone up. You know, previous generations of our development environments, a developer would take 1 to 2 days in order for them to actually get up and running. With our own Vagrant, running Docker, pulling images from Docker Hub, we were able to get them up and running in a couple of hours. So we had devs that were writing, committing, and pushing code on the first day, which was a huge win for us at Business Insider. We decided to go and revisit our production apps after this. And Fig and Compose were great for single host applications, but for a more sort of distributed multi-host solution, we turned to using Linux services and treating the containers as just another service, using Upstart, using sysv. But rolling our own Upstart scripts was actually a real pain for every container, even though we had all the containers up in Hub and we could just pull them down. So we decided to go back to what we knew, which was Puppet. We went to Puppet Forge, we looked at the Docker module, and it really fit pretty much every need that we had. It handled our image versions, it handled our runtime configurations, links, startup dependencies, and it all packaged it in a really nice initd script. So we could create a great parameterized class or module for an application, fill in the blanks with Hiera, pulling images from Docker Hub, and we're up and running. So here's an example of a development environment running the TBI codebase, Business Insider codebase. As you can see, there's multiple Docker images and Docker run commands. You can see that there's ports and links and volumes, environment variables, which are actually parameterized. So we can reuse the same code on any environment that we want, and as long as we specify the environment name, it'll pull in the correct dependencies. And all of this is pulled from Docker Hub as well. So this was our workflow pre-using Docker. It was a dev and ops kind of workflow. So we had developers and operations both banging their heads against keyboards, pushing code to GitHub. The developers would then trigger a Jenkins job, push it out to Amazon in production. And operations, they would write their code, their Puppet manifest, push it to GitHub. The Puppet server would pick it up, and then the Puppet agents would check in from the infrastructure and apply the updates that way. Post-Docker, we have a more DevOps workflow, where both developers and operations can actually build and ship images to Docker Hub. And then we can also choose our deployment strategy. We can either deploy the containers using Jenkins, we can deploy the containers using Puppet, or we can pick some other new, fantastic, as yet unknown way. So what's the future for Business Insider and its roadmap with Docker? Well, our current system is pretty good, but I really want to take orchestration to the next phase. So we're investigating a lot of different tools. Docker, Machine, Swarm, and Compose. We saw a lot of great stuff from that yesterday, and I'm really excited about that. Kubernetes, Mesosphere, the data center operating system, EC2 container service, CoreOS Fleet CTL. Everyone on the DevOps team at BI is really keen to pursue a different one. So it's really exciting for us to kind of battle it out for the supreme orchestration tool. But I'm looking forward to it, And we also want to dive deeper into triggering automated builds, either using the Docker Hub automated builds, pulling from our Git repos, or maybe using Jenkins Docker plugin to build containers, pulling from GitHub again. So I guess in summary, all I really have to say is, leverage what you know and have. You don't need to completely reinvent the wheel in order to use Docker. We found a really great mix of using Puppet, which we already had, and then, elevated our platform using Docker as well. There's no wrong way to experiment. The Docker ecosystem is huge, it's vast, so you'll always find a tool out there that fits your need, and if not, you can write one, somebody else will write one. It's just getting bigger and bigger every day. And the most important thing is to have fun with it, Because if we can't enjoy what we do, then what's the point of doing it at all? That's it. Thank you very much. I'd like to invite Marianna back up on stage.
Thank you, Chris. What a fantastic story. So want to talk again about Docker Hub. What's today with Docker Hub? What have we been doing? And actually, there's probably one word to summarize it all. And we've been focusing on qualities. And the way I define quality is performance, reliability, stability, scalability, security, and user experience. So everything you need as a user to rely on a service in production. We've been focused on that. We, in fact, re-architected completely the stack, all the way from front end to back end to our infrastructure. Let me give you some examples. Docker Hub is using Registry v2, the new version of Registry. The new Registry protocol actually makes fewer requests. It uses less bandwidth for each request, and it has a better caching mechanism. These are some of the metrics we've been getting from Docker Hub today around Docker pools. More than that, we have changed our CDN and networking implementation, and we have seen magnitude improvement in Docker pools. And in different regions, we've seen different improvements. Here's another example. Our UI has changed, and some of the basic operation and most common pages have been really getting faster, and we continue to optimize every day. Here's one more. We talked about reliability. This is also Docker Hub Registry, and shows a graph of before and after of the different errors you've seen around requests. We monitor the errors. You can guess the after is the better one with the smaller, except for the spike, which I can explain to you afterwards what it means. But what's more interesting about this graph is while you can see a much better error rate, a much smaller error rate after, it's actually different orders of the scale of the y-axis. So this is a much, much better improvement. We have also invested in security. In fact, you probably got the message in the last few days. Security is a big theme for us at Docker. We invested in security across the board in everything we do. Docker Hub is no exception. Here's some example. We are now doing ongoing scanning and audits of Docker Hub. We use both internal security experts as well as external companies that come and audit for us. We act on their recommendations. Registry v2, which Docker Hub implements, has a content addressable images. This helps make sure that the image you got is exactly the image you wanted and that the content hasn't been tempered. More than that, it sets the foundation for image signing. We have implemented an authentication microservice in Docker Hub where all of the authentication goes through this microservice. And last, this is still coming, but we also in our lab and in our staging actually environment have a one-time use of an ephemeral build host where your build is done in one host and then it goes away with no residual or risk for the next process. I've also talked about a new UI. This is where you all go, whoa. Thank you. We are rolling a new UI. Our new UI is not focused on the whoa factor, but on the factor that we actually expect you to use Docker Hub in your day-to-day, and it needs to be a very clean workflow, very usable UI, few operations to get to what you need. This is the new login page. This is one of the new pages around team workflow. This is one of the one where we really optimize so team can work efficiently with Docker Hub. We've also added all sorts of goodies in our new UI. This is an example. We added image sizes that many of you asked for, and you'll be able to see the image size in Docker Hub. Woo! If you want to hear more about Docker Hub and what's coming, there's actually a session this afternoon to talk about Docker Hub, so I invite you all to check it out. You're probably asking yourself, when is all this available and become available? And actually, some of the changes have been rolling already into the production Docker Hub, and it's available today. Registry v2 is already in. But I'm extremely pleased to announce now the general availability of the public beta of the new Docker Hub. You can go ahead and check this URL and try it out. And in fact, it still connects to your data of the Docker Hub you use today. So all your production data is available, and you should be able to use the new UI and the old UI. And I don't know, Ben, do you think there's some beta gods too that we need to please? Maybe. So may the God be pleased for the beta duration of Docker Hub. Please do check it out. And just during DockerCon and for this session, I'd like to offer this free offer of private repos for 90 days with this code. So please go ahead and you can use that. What's really nice about the new architecture of Docker Hub and why I'm really excited about it, it's not only that we emphasize quality and all these metrics we've talked about, we also changed the architecture that, we really took microservices to the new extreme. Some might call it nanoservices. I don't know, might coin a new term here. But really, we also emphasize on feature velocity. And what you're going to see from us is a lot more coming into Docker Hub in the coming weeks and months. So again, check it out and check it often. There's a lot more going on in engineering and in product and a lot more that we've been building. You've seen some of it yesterday. You've seen more today. And for the rest of it, I actually would like to welcome Scott Johnson, our SVP of Product Management. Welcome, Scott.
Nice. That's awesome. That's awesome. Wow, Salman, you're right. A lot of people. We're going to need a bigger boat. Thanks, Marianna. As Marianna mentioned, we've been talking a lot with the users since the launch of Docker Hub last year. And we've been trying to really listen hard to hear what is needed from users in order to run Docker in production. And we listen in conferences like this, in the meetups, face-to-face one-on-ones, but we also survey you all. We've sent surveys to several thousand of you, and you've been very generous with your feedback in telling us where we need to go, what we need to provide, what we need to build in a commercial offering to enable you to feel confident in deploying Docker in production. And for a subset of you, an on-premise registry is really a priority, and that often comes from industries that are heavily regulated, and they have some regulation requirements, or it comes from a corporation or an organization that's got heightened security requirements. But whatever the reason, we've heard loud and clear that an on-premise commercial registry solution is a priority. The second thing we've seen pretty clearly, and this has also exceeded our expectations, one of the most popular official repos on Docker Hub is actually the open source registry. How popular? 6.5 million polls popular. So we looked at that, we looked at the survey, and we said there's got to be a commercial solution. There's got to be a commercial product in here somewhere that we can, with the users, iterate towards, define, and ship. And we're really pleased this morning to share with you our answer to that, which we call the Docker Trusted Registry. This has been developed with you all. A very tight collaboration. Many of you have come to our office. We've surveyed you again and again about this. We've done one-on-ones and feedback online. And the requirements were really clear of what you were asking for. Of course, an on-premise registry that you could put behind your firewall. But of course, especially in large organizations, there's an investment in your authentication systems that already exists. And so you asked us, just help us plug into those. Help us plug into LDAP or Active Directory. Help us manage access control in a responsible way so devs aren't accidentally stepping on sysadmins, and sysadmins aren't accidentally stepping on devs, and DevOps isn't stepping on everyone. And so role-based access control is a very clear priority that we heard loud and clear. And of course, in large organizations, compliance becomes a very important requirement, a very important feature. And so logging all events, all accesses by all the users on the platform became very, very important. But what we also heard loud and clear, and I hope this is a theme that you'll continue to hear from Docker, and it's our goal that you continue to hear, is that the user is number one, and the user experience is number one. And so simply because this is an on-premise piece of software, or some might call kind of a large, complicated piece of software, we don't want to make it complicated to install and use. And so it has a one-click deploy, a one-click update feature that we think will just make it super easy to deploy and get going in rapid amount of time. And so, another theme on the easy feature set is graphical user interface, specifically on the admin console. We want to make it easy for you to check the host that the registry is deployed on, as well as super easy to set up and integrate the registry with your existing authentication systems. And there's more GUI in the admin side as well. So we first announced Docker Trusted Registry in December at DockerCon Europe, and we announced it as an alpha, super early, super raw. We had small sets of users that were helping us iterate with the product. We then went into a private beta in February and opened the curtain a little bit wider, and a little bigger set of users who, again, gave us wonderful feedback and iterated quickly with us. And then in April, we opened up an early access program. And we were really excited and humbled to see how interested and how excited the market was for this. And in fact, there's over 800 participants in that program. And it ran the gamut. It was from startups to Fortune 10. It was from all industries, from tech to healthcare, life science, financial services. And we were super excited to see how quickly many of them picked up the product, started working with us. And in fact, many of them are here today at this conference sharing their stories with you. Companies like Capital One, Disney, General Electric, who we're so honored to have them here and have their confidence to share their stories, share their journeys with you at DockerCon, as well as our next guest demo. I'm super excited about this next guest demo for 3 reasons. One is, as we say in Docker, Docker is a platform for build, ship, and run, right, across the entire application lifecycle. And this customer started on dev test, but as you'll hear, is very quickly heading towards run, very quickly heading towards production. So it's going to span the entire gamut of all the stages of the lifecycle. Second is, we're very honored to call them our very first. They are customer number 1 for Docker Trusted Registry, and they are willing to come here on stage and say they are customer number 1. And third, so Docker is my 5th startup. And as many of you know, as a startup, when you're about 2 years old and you've got, what, 160 people in a turtle-ish, typically your first commercial customer, especially for on-premise software, your first commercial customer tends to be another small company, or tends to be a startup. Tends to be someone who looks a lot like you, and you use friends and family to kind of get that product in the door and get that first check to kind of get the commercial side of the business going. We are humbled that customer number 1 that I've never seen in my 20-some years in tech is the US Government General Services Administration. So those of you who are not familiar, yes, that's it, thank you. If you're not familiar with the GSA, they are responsible for over $1 trillion of annual spend of goods and services for the US government. Very soon, that $1 trillion worth of transactions will be flowing through Dockerized distributed applications. You want to hear more about that? You want to hear more about that? You want to hear what's the real deal? All right, well, we could not have done this without an outstanding go-to-market partner in Booz Allen and Hamilton, who are the boots on the ground, working with us, giving us rich feedback. And I'm so pleased to welcome to the stage the senior lead technologist on the GSA project, Nirmal Mehta from Booz Allen and Hamilton.
All right. Thank you so much. Yeah. Hi, everybody. Good morning. Whoa, there's a lot of people here. Good morning, everyone. Everyone having a good time? Yeah. I know it's early. I know it's early. So, I'm Nirmal Mehta. I work at Booz Allen Hamilton as a senior lead technologist in the Strategic Innovations Group, and I work on the General Services Administration Integrated Award Environment. The Integrated Award Environment is responsible for all the contracting systems that the US government runs, all the contract management, all the transactions, all the documentation. If you do business with the government, those systems are where as a firm you register. And they came out with a proposal, with a project to revamp those systems. Now, Washington, D.C., they love their monoliths. We have, in lots of different projects, I've seen nothing but these gigantic monolithic applications. And I think it's because they drive by this every morning and are like, oh yeah, I like to keep my monolith alive. So at the GSA, these systems, they currently look like this. Raise your hand if you've got systems that look like these. These stovepiped, exactly. So you want to keep these monoliths alive. You want to keep them chugging. They're doing their good job. But as you can see, each one of these has replicated services. You're implementing different technologies to do the same exact thing. So we've got a bunch of applications at the GSA, and they have different RDMS solutions. They have different integrated authentication and access management systems, different load balancers. Maybe some of the components are the same. But about 50% or 60% of each of these applications, that's not the business value add to these. That's just getting the infrastructure running just to support that application. That's a lot of redundancy. So they came out and asked Booz Allen to help them consolidate and create a open source first based, cloud first based, infrastructure as code oriented common services platform that cross-cuts all those common features so that the application developers that are revamping and modernizing these gigantic systems that run essentially the government contracting world and their spending, and let them focus on the business logic and the actual adding of the value to the end customers. And the end customers are us, the US taxpayers. It's us, the US businesses that want to do business with the government. It's us, the government employees that want to get new things, new products, new services, from screwdrivers all the way to Amazon Cloud Services. So what I'm going to show you today is that we took Docker and we're Dockerizing and creating these common services in all these layers. And it's amazing that we get a chance to use open source software first, and that's a big thing now, is open source software first to implement all these features across the board. So I'm going to show a quick demo of what we've kind of built out for our production environment. It's super simple and straightforward, and I think it'll resonate with a lot of the organizations, with the people that raise their hands when they have those monolithic apps, how to kind of ease into using Docker even in production. So we have here on the top right, I'm going to go through a flow of just doing a git push in a GitHub Enterprise on-premise. Then Jenkins is going to build a Docker image, push it to the Docker Trusted Registry, and then communicate out to a Swarm cluster on AWS, and pull that image back down from the Docker Trusted Registry on-premise. And then we have an amazing tool from a great Docker engineer, Evan Hazlett, he created Interlock, which is a dynamic HA proxy load balancing tool that automatically detects when containers come up and down and load balances automatically. So you guys interested in seeing that demo? There we go. All right. So everyone's familiar with Docker Hub or GitHub, right? GitHub Enterprise, and Docker Hub as well. So what I have here is an application. It's just a simple Java application. It's actually the Heroku Getting Started application. And we have here is our staging environment, our staging branch. Now, I'm the product owner, and I want to push this out to production. So what's a typical workflow? You do a pull request, right? So we're going to go from master, from production like, and do a pull request into master. And I'm going to merge that pull request in, confirm the merge. And what this automatically does is oh, there we go. Oh, gods, there we go. Yay. So what this automatically does is it kicks off a build on Jenkins off that commit. This is a very straightforward DevOps workflow. So we'll wait till that build kicks off. And what we can see here is the Maven build is going through. We've got a successful build, so this is after all your tests and integration tests. It's communicating out to Swarm. It's building the Docker image. It's pushing it up to the registry. So we have an on-premise Docker Trusted Registry with LDAP integration. So only this Jenkins box can actually push to the Docker Trusted Registry. It's the only authorized user. Now it's going to find the existing builds for the production containers and roll through updating those containers and deploying the new build. Now, wasn't that super easy? That's the kind of flow you can get with Docker. So in each of these environments, we have a dev dot the project and the application dot com dot prod. And so for each of these environments, each branch automatically gets a name for that environment. So that's dynamically done through Interlock. So now I just pushed the prod. It used to didn't exist until now, so let's refresh, and there you go. Now we have a production container running, just like that. So back to, yep. So the benefits that we've seen with using Docker in our GSA integrated and warm environment is that it really helps us focus on improving the customer services that we can provide. The application developers no longer have to think about all the components of their stack, the IAM, the load balancer, all that stuff. That's all taken care of by the platform. They just have to focus on the business logic. That increases their time to market. You just saw that pull request and deploying to production, but that's the same for dev, test, on their laptop, with Docker Machine, Docker Compose, Docker Swarm. You can run those all in different environments, and that increases the time to market, and it's simple. It reduces the cost because now we're using open source technologies that are either supported or community-based to provide those common services across these applications. And we're targeting, so the original monolithic apps, they had only manual CI/CD, continuous deployment processes. And now we're going from that directly to what was that, like 10 seconds, 30-second build time. So the goal is actually a 2-week production sprint cycle for the new applications that they come on. And it decreases our time for security review. And I'll mention a little bit more about that too. So in our next steps, with the announcement of Notary yesterday, I didn't know the name of what it was going to be until yesterday, so I didn't put it in the slide. But the image governance through provenance is a huge deal in the government. We have to go through a lot of security reviews and technical assessments of the whole entire platform every time something changes. Now, in a DevOps model, things change all the time. So if we can provide a way to say, we take care of all these security things so the application developers don't have to worry about that. And then even in the application, we can now with Notary, once it becomes production ready, we can sign those images plus the documentation to run those applications and sign those and get our security reviewers to approve that. And that could be used across the government at any kind of agency or place that has that same security threshold, which is amazing. I mean, that cuts down cost across the board. So for next steps, I'm working with Diogo and Nathan on integrating the Square.com's KeyWiz secret management tool and inserting secrets into containers at runtime. So look out for some more news around that. I know the next step as you're testing out with Docker, with Docker in production, is how do you handle your secrets at runtime? Database connection strings, keys, certs. And there's a lot of new work that's being done with Docker and with the GSA and Booz Allen around how to do that in a very secure way, either on production or any kind of environment. And then we're also excited to see what's coming on in container networking and deeper integration with the interlock plugins. So if you want to see more about my demo, check out my session at 2:35 today in room 7, I believe, but check the schedule. And with that, I'd like to return it back to Scott Johnson.
Thanks, man. That's awesome. Thanks, Nirmal. We're going to be watching this one really closely. Customer number 1 is headed toward production in the July timeframe, if I'm not mistaken. And as Nirmal referenced, that $1 trillion of annual spend and purchases, those are our tax dollars. So you might say we all have a vested interest in the success of customer number 1, right? All right, no pressure, no pressure, no pressure. So obviously, ready for production, Docker for production starts with great products, but it doesn't stop there. You've been very clear with us. Again, whether it's been face-to-face meetups, DockerCon, or surveys, you've been very clear that in addition to a strong product foundation, support is absolutely critical in order to move applications into production on Dockerized infrastructure. And so we thought a lot about this, and we wanted to create a commercial solution that packaged support in a way that made it easy, the overall solution, easy to adopt, as well as different ways to select according to your use case, so it made it easy on the wallet. And so I'd like to describe for you what that looks like. It starts with the Docker engines, the runtime. Actually, no longer, now we have run C. So Docker engines, it starts with the platform. And these Docker engines have been certified against production operating systems. In the most recent release, RHEL 7.0, 7.1, Ubuntu 14.04 with SE Linux and AppArmor enabled, respectively. And these are then supported for 12 months after release, including patches and hotfixes. And so this is part of this commercial offering. That's kind of component one. Component two, as you heard about already this morning, is a registry. You need a registry in order to share and store your images with teammates and colleagues across your lifecycle stages. And so that could either be an on-prem solution with the Docker Trusted Registry, or if you prefer a SaaS delivery model, you could use the private repos in the Docker Hub registry. And third is commercial support for both of these pieces of technology. Commercial support for the engines, open source, as well as commercial support for commercial software or commercial SaaS product. I want to do a timeout. I'm going to join Marianna's call-outs. Our support team is just a phenomenal set of individuals, and oftentimes they're the unsung heroes of Docker. But for many of you, they're often the very first touch point. They're the way that you get to know us when you call in with a request or when you send in an email. So Ian, Andy, and your team, I don't know if you guys just raise your hand. If you guys just give these guys a round of applause, they are really the unsung heroes of the customer experience at Docker. Thank you, guys. Saved our bacon again and again and again. And we take all three of these components and we package them together in a subscription. And the subscription scales based on number of engines as well as support levels. So maybe for your use case, email support is sufficient. Maybe you need business critical, which it's our label for 5x12 support. Or maybe you need to go all the way, business day, 5x12. Or maybe you need to go all the way to business critical, which is 24/7 and phone. So number of engines, support levels, all come together to kind of find the right price point for you. What's the right price point? For 10 Docker engines, you can get started at $150 a month. Isn't that great? That's a great price point, no? You spend more than that in drinks in the next 2 nights. Okay, so that's how you can pay for it. How do you acquire it? Ben and Solomon yesterday spent a lot of time appropriately talking about that a platform is nothing without its ecosystem. And so it's true for commercial solutions as well. Commercial solutions need go-to-market partners to help customers adopt, deploy, and be successful with products. So we're really excited to share with you on stage here some phenomenal go-to-market partners. First up, Amazon, a phenomenal partner. You heard from them yesterday about some of the things we're doing in the tool side, in the plumbing side, as well as on the platform side. They're also a go-to-market partner with the AWS Marketplace, where you can acquire these commercial solutions that include Docker Trusted Registry up on AWS now as we speak. So if you want to go deploy, go for it. Similar with Microsoft Azure. If you want to acquire a commercial solution that has Docker Trusted Registry, it's in a VHD up now on Microsoft Azure in their marketplace. And finally, we're really pleased to announce that IBM is the first Docker reseller partner who is selling Docker Trusted Registry along with IBM's world-class support. So you could have a round of applause for these partners who are making it possible to bring these solutions to market. And of course, with just a credit card, you can go to Docker Hub and swipe the card and download directly yourself. So you want it? Want to try it? Who out there in the audience wants it? Yeah? Okay, there you go. All right, there you go. Docker.com/solutions will take you, and you'll see everything from $150 a month on up. Okay, so we've talked about products, we've talked about services, we've talked about packaging those into commercial solutions to make it easy for customers to adopt and deploy and be successful. We want to stand back and talk with some technologists that have been working with Docker on the front lines of the distributed application revolution, and really hear what they're saying and have a discussion about what questions customers have, what issues they're running into, what can we anticipate for the next 12 to 18 months, because the market is moving so quickly. So join me in welcoming to the stage Mark Rusinovich from Microsoft, Jason McGee from IBM, and Michael Farber from Booz Allen and Hamilton.
Thanks, Scott.
Hey, Jason. Where we go? Boom, boom, boom.
Now there was a time when you loved me so I couldn't be wrong. Now you need to know. See, I've been a man.
All right, guys, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
You know, the market is moving so quick. It seems like just a year ago we were just at the cusp of microservices, cloud native, whatever you want to call it. But even in the last 6 months, it seems to be accelerating. What are customers telling you? What are users telling you as to the reason? What's the why behind the interest? And Michael, do you want to start? You've got the microphone.
I'd be pleased to start. I think you heard a little bit, or actually been hearing a lot of it. It's about speed to value. And it's about a real strong emphasis on reducing time, cost, complexity, and risk. So the extent to which you can actually get to value for your customer, that's really what's framing this whole pretty much viral revolution that we're seeing. The pressures are just that intense.
I certainly agree with that. I think we've been talking a lot over the last couple of days about this kind of idea of getting to production. And I think over the last year, this desire to go so much faster, right? I think a lot of what's driving microservices and that kind of approach is about how do we accelerate delivery of applications. That desire to go fast is accelerating the need to figure out how to get things like Docker into the state that we can get to production with it. So I'm seeing that pressure as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and it's definitely the agility aspect of it. If you look at the way that application development's evolved over the last 15 years, it used to be traditional IT developers, monolithic applications, you deploy them and they sit there for a few years and live out their kind of useful life. And these days, because the world is transforming so much with the accessibility, the availability of compute on demand, that is pushing businesses to deliver solutions much faster, and for that, they need these kinds of technologies that enable that.
I think you hit a really interesting point, Mark, there, in that they have been investing a long time. And one thing that we see in talking with certainly large organizations is they get excited by the microservices idea, right, or the cloud native, like, or distributed apps. Like, wow, you know, I get it, right? I want that speed. But the very next conversation is, oh, and I have 10 to 15 years. And they kind of look at us and say, so what do I do about that? And so just curious, kind of, as you've been having those conversations, like, what do they do with the last 10 or 15 years of investment in applications? It's not going to throw it out overnight. You want to start?
Yeah. I mean, you know, it's funny. Anytime something new comes along, and Docker and the revolution we're all part of here, I think, is an exceptional example of something really taking hold and getting in people's minds. But we often think, oh, this is the new way that everything is going to get solved, and that's just not the reality. And so a lot of what clients that I'm working with are trying to figure out is how do they combine the benefits and the new technologies and connect it back to the things that they had. Either connect it back on the network or transition application code into these new models. And how do they also connect it into how they operate? You know, how do they connect it into their delivery pipelines or connect it into their operational tools? And that's actually really challenging because you don't want to just connect it to how you do now, because part of what's going on here is a cultural transformation about how you do development and how your process works and how people work. So what you do now is probably not actually what you want, but you can't leave that all behind. Right? You have to figure out how to connect and how to bring it into the life cycle.
Yeah. Michael, do you want to?
Yeah, I think my colleague Nirmal described for you, and very well, I might add. Let's hear it for Nirmal. That's the first time he's ever spoken.
First time speaking?
He spoke to 7 people yesterday. That was the previous high in the number. I think what we're seeing is, you know, and you hit the nail on the head of these, for lack of a better term, hybrid solutions. I mean, when the GSA goes home on a Friday, they're not going to come back on a Monday and have everything that was done prior to gone and have a whole new environment. So I think Jason hit the nail on the head. It's basically architecting or creating new architectures that, you know, recognize that these monoliths will be around for a little longer and that you need to be able to connect to them. So we're finding some promise in doing that at the platform level. In other words, or at least that's the level of consequence for the end user, and that all the architectural work and engineering that goes on underneath is really to connect that. Somewhat behind the scenes, But then over time, as systems evolve, you'll start reducing the requirement or the need for those legacy systems and start migrating them over. And we're starting to develop roadmaps for that as well.
Yeah, and we see the same thing, of course, in many conversations with customers that are talking about going to the cloud. It's the same kind of conversations about how do I do it. And obviously, when you're starting with greenfield applications, you're going to want to start with these kinds of technologies that we're talking about here. Certainly for those large monolithic applications that exist, there's two classes of them. Generally, the ones that are going to just live out their useful lives that way. They're not really mission critical. They're not core to the business. But anything that's core to the business, they've got to start thinking about right now how to modernize them. And a transition to the cloud is a great opportunity to start doing that. You're going to be changing the application to get it into the cloud. You might as well take a look at it, re-architecting it to take advantage of these kinds of things.
Well, all three of you kind of hit on two other points about transformations, right? We're at a tech conference with developer system, and so of course we want to focus on the tech. But transformations are about technology as well as people and processes and culture, right? And we're not supposed to talk about our feelings or people or anything over here on stage, so we're not going to spend a lot on this point, but like, do you guys wander into the other layers up above the tech and help organizations with their process and with their culture and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, absolutely. In fact, as a technologist, it's amazing how many conversations you get in. Sometimes I feel like I should have had like a psychology degree in college instead of a tech degree. You get into those conversations, and a lot of what is really driving some of this movement is about how people are trying to transform how their teams work. The technology is an enabler or a tool, but really what they're trying to get at is how do I take these big complex teams building these monoliths and break them down into some meaningful size that can move with much greater speed. And so if you don't have the conversation about the culture, you're kind of missing out on some level.
Michael, I bet this is a lot of the strike zone for Booz Allen, right? Because it's about technology, but it's also about transformation, changing organizations and how they operate, how they think.
Yeah, it very much is, and I'm glad you raised the question. I think it's a journey that we're going on. I mean, you think about we're a 100-year-old firm, and on the 101st year, now moving into the 102nd, we're basically looking to do things quite differently. And I think what's most important about this transformation, it's really starting, for lack of a better way, without diminishing levels, but it's a bottoms-up approach. It's a developers-up approach. This is not some top-down effort. This is being basically brought to us by the development communities within the firm, and then opening our eyes to the fact that they're connecting across a very, very broad ecosystem. So that cultural move is something that it's not so much that we have to push it, it's that we need to understand how to embrace it and how to understand the value add that it provides, not just to our firm, but the community that we want to be part of. So for 100 years, we like to say, we would team with folks, and the day we won a job, we'd immediately, the second day, try to figure out how to get out of that teaming arrangement. Now what we're trying to do when we win a job is go to market with the entire ecosystem behind us and continually bring in others. This is a major transformational change, not just for the firm, but for the entire consulting culture. And that's what we're seeing. And I think it's starting with things like this. When you talked about how many folks were in the first session or the first DockerCon and what you're seeing now, I mean, that's just part of it.
I'd love to pick up on that in terms of change for the actual organizations that are leading change. And I think one of the things clear from the Docker movement, if you will, is open source is playing a pivotal role in that transformation. And it's no longer a side project, or it's no longer kind of an afterthought. It's like it's ground zero for some of these transformations of the stack. How are you leading through that as from very commercial entities? How is you leading your customers, your ecosystems through this transformation that 10 years ago, open source wasn't the mainstream part of the conversation? You want to start, Mark?
Sure, I'll go ahead and start with that, because open source, Microsoft and open source haven't traditionally been
that's a good one.
Two words associated with each other.
Right.
But more and more.
Netscape. I'm from Netscape, so. Right.
But more and more, I think it is. And Microsoft's made a very deliberate effort to have open source as part of our culture and as part of what we enable our customers to do on top of our platforms. And there's lots of examples over the last few years, from the first one, which is when Azure launched infrastructure as a service at preview, the day one, it launched with Windows and Linux support.
Yeah.
And that was a pig's fly kind of moment for a lot of people.
Right.
If you even take a look at some of the core Microsoft technologies, like the core CLR and .NET, that's been open sourced as well and been ported to open source platforms.
Yeah. Official repo up on Docker Hub, right?
Yeah, official repo for the container up on Docker Hub for that. So The transformation's been one as far as helping customers, also internally. So we've got now education inside the company about how to use open source, how to contribute to open source, and we've got tons of open source contributions, including to Docker
That's right.
as well.
Absolutely.
So it's been a big transformation just in the last few years at Microsoft.
Great.
So coming from IBM, I mean, open source has been core to our strategy for 20 plus years. I mean, from Linux and Apache through Java and Eclipse to, Cloud Foundry and OpenStack and Docker. And for a long time, we felt like to be successful for our clients, you have to have an ecosystem. You have to have the kind of combined efforts of that ecosystem. You have to have the right governance models. I was very excited with the things we worked together and announced yesterday around the Open Container Project as a next step in building an open governance model around how we evolve this incredibly important technology for all of us. I think customers today, more than they probably ever have, understand the value of open source as part of the solution and the value that communities and ecosystems bring. So it's actually, frankly, I think an easier conversation to have now than it was 10 or 15 years ago. And frankly, for commercial firms, a less defensive conversation, because I think, maybe in the past people viewed it as open source versus commercial, and I just don't think that's the world we're in now. I think almost all interesting commercial solutions have lots of open technology at their core.
Yeah. Michael, how about you? Has this been a learning, the open source ecosystem and the open source ethos, has that been a learning for Booz Allen?
It's been a fairly significant one. I think also what we're finding is that it's opened our eyes to yet another way to, as I said earlier, when we frame the problem around time, cost, complexity, and risk, that becomes really the way to assess. So whether something's open source or proprietary or otherwise, you're still applying the same framework. And to the extent that you can prove out that open source is not going to create any undue harm, we're finding the adoption rates very, very high. I'll tie that back to the cultural aspect, because that's also very, very important. Yeah. We're incentivizing our teams differently by looking to leverage open source first, or reuse and repurpose first. So there's more stock paid in that. Now, we may, dare I say, for colleagues who are listening somewhere else, that may force us to charge our clients less for the services we provide. And that's something that's taken some folks a little getting used to. But the notion is we're recognizing the need to do that and rewarding, incentivizing not just our own colleagues, but the firms that we partner with. And we have two good partners right sitting next to me that we work with. And that shared kind of value, that shared approach is what enables us, I think, to deliver very, very high quality, low cost services to our clients.
Yeah. Yeah.
Scott, if I can brag here for a second.
Please.
The #1 contributor to Docker since the beginning of May, Microsoft.
Microsoft.
Yeah.
All right. How about that? Yeah. Yeah. Like you said, one of those moments, like who would have thought it 10 years ago, right? Interesting. So the market's moving quickly, right? We've all acknowledged that, and I mean, Docker just a little more than 2 years is here where it is. The conversation the last 6 to 9 months is moving pretty quickly as well. It seems to be moving up the stack from where we sit, but I'm just curious from where you sit and what customers are trying to do, or the questions they're asking, kind of how has the conversation changed? Or even just the last year since DockerCon. Michael wasn't here last year, DockerCon, but let me put you on the spot, Michael. So from a year ago, when you're watching your customer base and they're starting to explore cloud native or distributed or microservices, like how has that conversation changed in the last 12 months?
Well, my colleagues were here last year, and they made sure that I knew much about it, and that's actually what caused us to invest of time and effort quite heavily. Normal and others, notwithstanding, this has been a big deal. The GSA, customer #1, who we'll affectionately refer to them as, is, that's really what's changing the game. The fact that, look, the government's been trying to go at repurposing and leveraging services ever since they crafted service-oriented architecture, component-based architecture, the federal enterprise architecture. Billions of dollars have been spent on technology the last 20, 30 years, always with this nagging notion that they shouldn't be spending that much, or if they're spending, it shouldn't go for duplicative spend. So what I'm getting at in terms of where we are now is that not just you all here are going to watch what GSA is doing, but the entire federal government is watching what GSA is doing. As a matter of fact, in the past week or two, we've gotten something like 7 or 8 inquiries just based on word of mouth from talking to GSA representatives to come in and talk to these agencies. So we're seeing a keen interest to rapidly adopt, at least in trial mode, to give this stuff a shot. So I see customers 2, 3, 4 to 10 coming very, very quickly. And that's good for everybody in the room because that's going to help to underwrite and finance further development.
From my perspective, I think what's really changed is kind of how people have accepted that this technology is going to play a role. You know, a year ago, I mean, all of us in this room probably are more familiar than most with what's going on in the container space. But the broader industry, you know, last year I think was largely going, what is this thing? And what role might it play? And this year, especially in the last 6 months, I think have transitioned to, okay, I want to use this thing. I've kind of had the intent. How do I get there? And so a lot more of the both technical and business conversation has started to slant towards, you know, how do I build this into my delivery pipeline? How do I build runtime quality of service and availability and security and compliance around this thing? How do I get visibility into it? So they're really starting to say, in order to achieve the intent, I need the life cycle to be built around it, right? And that's where, to me, the conversation's going, and where, frankly, a lot of the innovation needs to come next, is how we bring that together in a more open kind of way.
Yeah. Mark?
Well, same thing. Since last year, of course, I don't talk to a single Microsoft customer where the word Docker doesn't come up.
Wow.
And that's been a change in the last year.
Yeah,
but another one is that people get the single container aspect of containerization, the putting some code in a container and then launching it. But more and more, it's about these microservices we're talking about, and that's when you get into container orchestration and platform as a service, and how do I do rolling updates with zero downtime, and how do I maintain availability, and how do I have these things connect together and deploy them and version them. And so that's a big area of focus. And of course, you know, Docker's heading in that direction too, with things like Compose and Swarm. And that's really where we see things going, is now I get containers, let's talk about applications that consist of containers.
Yeah. Yeah, well, let's go to that, because we're talking about kind of the solutions that customers are asking for, and now that 12 months has rolled forward. Starting with you, Mark, I know there's a lot we're about to talk about with Microsoft and Docker, but maybe just highlight one solution that you see that Microsoft's putting together that is a particularly interesting use case or an interesting customer request, and kind of what's the why behind that.
Well, obviously, the one we're going to get to, the big use case, is containers on Windows.
Just a second, right?
And so we've got Windows Server containers, which we've announced and we demoed at Build, and I'll be showing here in a few minutes. But that's been, I think, opening up the world of the Windows ecosystem and a large portion of our customer base that uses Windows, bringing containers to them.
Yes, yes. Jason, how about IBM Stack?
So a lot to talk about. Maybe I'll just highlight a couple of things.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, the two big things are the work we're doing together around Docker Trusted Registry and integration with our on-premise products like Urban Code Deploy and private cloud solutions. A lot of interest in that. On the cloud side, with the new IBM Container Service on Bluemix, which we've announced is go live now this week, you know, a really rich environment that we've been building there. You know, I think there's some interesting things. One of the things we've been working on in the spirit of kind of visibility is actually giving clients the ability to look at their Docker images and understand the vulnerability and posture of those images. Are there known security vulnerabilities present within those images? Are there policy violations? I mean, all of us work a lot with clients, and we have kind of best practices around, you know, passwords and password expiration rules and things like that. Do the images follow those kind of policies? So tools like that, provided in a cloud context, I think give customers the trust and faith they need to move these technologies forward. So we've been working on things like that.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think we're seeing, if anyone's following the government, the federal government in particular, the whole move towards DevOps. So, you know, as a management consultant, you know, also with a really strong, you know, depth in technology, we're trying to actually help them realize the promise of that. So we see DevOps as the banner, but we see open source, we see crowd, we see containerization as all parts of that. So we're looking for projects, engagements, prototypes, proofs, and pilots to get going as quickly as possible with them to show, you know, really what's the art of the possible. And, you know, the GSA is one piece, and as I said, you know, taking all the announcements that have been made over the past few days and, you know, rethinking a little bit or refining the strategies for go-to-market is really what we're going to be doing. And I know I'll be following up with IBM and Microsoft and others very quickly, because we already have joint customers. We already have key challenge and issues that we've been all grappling with for quite some time on behalf of them. And the notion is that how can we take these, you know, new advances and new releases and put them to work very quickly.
Right, right. All right, we're heading down to the final minutes here, so crystal ball time. All right, crystal ball time. So we had some exciting announcements yesterday in terms of up and coming technologies, and, you know, maybe a simple framing is Docker started with compute, Saw some exciting things work on networking the last year. Just starting to see chalk lines of storage coming up in terms of the 3 compute resources, but there's interesting things happening on the governance dimension as well. Jump ahead 12 months. So we're 12 months, we're here, we're back on stage. What's the conversation? Where's the conversation moved to? Where's the interest, whether it's from a customer standpoint or a technology standpoint or a governance standpoint? Jason, you want to take a crack?
Crystal balls are always dangerous, but
yes.
I guess I have a couple things I hope we're talking about. One is a bunch of amazing success stories around customers running large-scale container applications, you know, that are important and critical to their businesses. You know, I think we've talked a lot about this week, but there's a lot more to do. And so hopefully in the next year that actually becomes reality. I would like to see that. The other area where I would like the conversation to go to is we've talked a lot about community. This week. There's actually, you know, this huge vibrant Docker community, but there are very closely related communities around Cloud Foundry, around OpenStack, and other things in cloud. And I'd like to see how some of those things come together over the next 12 months, because I think there's a lot of overlapping problems that people are trying to solve together.
You got a clap over here?
Yeah, I'll go short. I think a year from now, which means we would be back here or somewhere close by. I think customers 1 through 12 on stage speaking to you about the experience and what they've been able to accomplish. I think that would be a very strong signal as to where this is all headed. And we're more than happy to help make that real.
Excellent. Excellent.
Yep, and I think to follow on what I said earlier about the trend towards microservices and microservice-based applications, I think we're going to see a lot more discussion about PaaS and microservices on top of containers. And I think just to plug Microsoft a little bit, we'll be part of that conversation. We've got a microservice application platform called Service Fabric that we're going to be working on integrating with Docker as well.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, please join me in thanking our panelists for the conversation. They'll be obviously around afterwards. All right. Thanks, guys. Thank you, Mike. All right, Mark, we're going to move over here and let them strike the set. So we're going to talk a bit about the road that Docker and Microsoft have been on, and you made a couple references on the panel, and it's exciting stuff. But maybe before we get to the futures, let's talk a little bit about where we've been. And obviously, 2 years ago, Docker started on Linux and proved to be a great place to start, and it's been growing quickly. But as Docker's been adopted by larger organizations, we've found a lot of heterogeneity in those organizations and heterogeneity around the operating system, which of course means we saw a lot of Windows. And so that community in the last 12 to 18 months has very excitedly kind of come to us and said, what's the plan? What's the plan? So I'm curious, like from Microsoft's standpoint, if you roll back kind of 12 months or so, what were you hearing around Docker and containers and Windows?
Well, we heard obviously lots of people talking about Dockers, and then the Windows people saying, where's Docker? Where's containers for us? Where's Docker for us? And so that's what we started this journey with you guys on bringing Docker containers to Windows and making that available to these customers.
Well, it's been a whirlwind 12 months if we just look back to last year, DockerCon, and I don't think we have time to kind of go through all the different initiatives and projects that have been launched and code that's been open sourced. But if you had to call out a couple favorites or a couple highlights, Mark, what would those be?
So Windows Server containers, the integration of Docker into Visual Studio, the support for Docker, the integration of Docker into Azure in various ways, from the Docker extension to Docker images.
Yeah, no, and more to come. And I think, not to front run it too much, we've already probably spoiled the lead, but Microsoft's been incredibly busy in the public repos of Docker recently. And that can only mean one thing. That means you've got something to show us.
That's right.
So you guys want to see what Microsoft's been up to in the repos? All right.
All right, thanks, Scott. All right, let me log in here. So I've got here my Windows machine, and I've got Visual Studio open here with a project called Parts Unlimited. This Parts Unlimited application, just to set it up, because I'll be using this throughout the demos here, is a multi-tier application. It's got a front end that's an ASP.NET front end. It's got a middle tier, which is Node, and it's got a back end based on MongoDB. I've got loaded here into Visual Studio that front end code, ASP.NET. And I'm going to demonstrate here the integration of Visual Studio with the Docker publishing experience by clicking here on the project and selecting the Publish button. And what I've specified here is that I'm going to publish it to a Docker host, this application. And if I look at the connection, you can see that we've added support for all of the various settings that you want in your connection, including a TLS connection for security as you push this thing up to the host. And I'll press the publish button, and what that's going to kick off is an execution by Visual Studio of Docker client, which is going to build that image, push it up to that host, and then we're going to automatically launch that web page that gets there. And this happens to be on a Linux machine. If I go Docker info, because I'm pointing at that Docker host, you can see that here it is. And I don't know why that was funny, but that it's actually a Linux host that I just pushed this thing to. So now I'm going to switch over to my Mac. This is my Mac desktop, and I've got, yep, it's a Mac desktop. I've started playing with the Mac because I'm trying to figure out how to get QuickTime into a Docker container. I guess that wasn't too soon. Not that Windows ever crashes. Now, what I've got here opened is Visual Studio Code. This is our free Visual Studio release that's available for Windows, for Mac, and for Linux. And it's an intelligent IDE that includes IntelliSense for a number of different languages. Like here I've got, let me open up the project here. I've got the server.js part of that node tier of that Parts Unlimited application. And when I type in something like HTTP, you can see because we've created types in TypeScript for all of the objects in the node framework here that I get IntelliSense completion on that object. Let me undo that. But we've also worked to integrate support for Docker, specifically Docker Compose. You can see I've got a Docker Compose file here that describes that multi-tier application with the web tier, the node tier, and the database tier. And we've got IntelliSense in here, including on things like the image itself, where I start to type the name of that image. And you can see that this is pulling directly from Docker Hub the images that match that string. So I'll go ahead and select the official Mongo image and then save this file. And I've got this project up in Visual Studio Online in a Git repo up there. And what I immediately see here, because I've got connected there, is that I got one change pending. And if I click, you can see exactly what's changed, the edit that I just made. I can type in a commit message, and then I can commit that, and then finally push it up to Visual Studio Online. Now, I haven't just pushed that to the Git repo. I've kicked off a series of continuous integration build steps. And so to take a look at what happened there, let's switch over to Visual Studio Online. Here's the Git repository for Parts Unlimited. And if I go to history, you can see I've pushed a bunch of commits, including there's DockerCon, the one that I just made. If I go to the Build tab, you can see a history of the various builds that have kicked off over the last few days. The one that I just kicked off is going to take a few minutes, so I'm going to show you the history of one that we launched a few days ago. And if I click it, you can see the status of that build. When I click Edit, here we can take a look at the steps, the continuous integration steps that were followed, including building a Docker image. And these are things that we've added. This is an extensible framework for continuous integration in Visual Studio Online. And what we've done over the last few months is start to put in support for Docker publishing and Docker continuous integration, including things like building the Docker image of what I just pushed, running containerized unit tests, pushing the image to Docker Hub, creating an Azure resource group, which is a collection of VMs, then configuring a Docker Swarm cluster on those VMs, and then finally, as the last step, pushing that Compose application to that Docker Swarm. And so this is the integration of Visual Studio Online with Docker Compose and Docker Swarm and Visual Studio tooling for Docker Compose. We've been talking a lot about Windows server containers, and that Docker node image. It's kind of ironic because I pushed the ASP.NET image to a Linux container, but we pushed the node code to a Windows container. And I've got here on the Mac, this Docker host is what we're pointing at is a Windows Server Docker host. See Windows Server Technical Preview 2. And when I do a Docker PS, then you can see that there's the Node.js container that we've launched into that Docker host. I've got one last thing to show you, and that is the integration of Docker into the Azure Marketplace. So here I am in the Azure portal, and I click on the Marketplace tile. And you can see that as of this morning, the featured Marketplace item is Docker Trusted Registry. This allows me, with a few clicks, the ability to deploy my own private Docker Trusted Registry, just entering a few parameters and then pressing the OK button, and that'll be up in a few minutes for my use. But if I go back and press the New button here, you can see that we've also added support for container apps. So Dockerized container apps are now in the Marketplace. You can see some featured ones here. If I click open the Marketplace altogether, here's the list of ones. And we not only include single container apps, but multi-container apps specified with Compose here, including this WordPress plus MySQL application. And when I create that, you can see with integration with the Azure Resource Manager and the portal, we're able to specify configuration not just for the virtual machine onto which this is going to get deployed, but also the containers that are going to be launched into those virtual machines here, the MySQL root password for that MySQL container. So that's an example of the integration of Docker with the Azure Marketplace. Now, I've got one last thing to show you, and this is kind of where Microsoft is heading and innovating with containers. We imagine a world of HoloLens and containers, where you can walk around your containers, even build Minecraft inside your containers. But what we've done as a first step is this weekend, there was a hackathon that a couple Microsoft employees, Hashi Bai and Dan Fernandez, won. And I'm going to show you what they won with, which is integration of Docker and Cortana. So I'm going to switch back, because we all want to launch containers with our voice, I think. That's a cool thing to do. So if I go back here, demo gods, Docker run Redis.
Sure, running container Redis.
And so that was, that container did launch. There was an app that flashed. That was the app that won. But what we would have seen is that that app, also as part of that hackathon, was an app that launches and tells you what containers have been launched into your host and shows you the logs for them. But looks like the demo gods only partially were in my favorite this morning. But so I want to thank you very much. Again, I want to thank Docker for having Microsoft here on stage with you and the great partnership we've had over the last couple of years, and may that continue. Thanks a lot.
Cortana brings back Halo days. Right? Good stuff. Well, it's been a great morning. You've been a great audience. We're really on the edge, on the bubble of whether or not to show this last one to you. Do you still have enough energy for one more? One more? Yeah? OK. OK. And the reason is that this is still in the lab. This is still kind of simmering. It's not a product yet at all. It's futures. It's a concept demo. But it's a pretty exciting one. And it really is in answer to some of the questions we've been hearing all along this theme of Docker in production. And the questions are along the lines of the following. And they're coming from a different part of the org, typically. They're coming from the operations, from the sysadmins. How should I manage Docker applications in production? As an ops person, I want to stand up a self-service bureau and make it easy and secure. I want the both together. I want easy and secure for my devs to self-service approved images. We get this one a lot. Docker, please tell us how to use all these great tools. All the great tools you saw on day one, please, Docker, provide us a prescribed, opinionated way to integrate all these so that we can be successful with our deployments. There are a lot of questions about how to get visibility into fleets of tens, hundreds, and thousands of containers across multiple data centers. And of course, once they're deployed, how can I easily scale my application? And so we've been spending a lot of time thinking about how do we make this come true? How do we move this ahead with 160 people and a turtle, few resources, and we call it Project Orca. And Project Orca has a vision of providing the following: a top-to-bottom integrated stack that takes the tools and the plumbing that we've been talking about for the last couple of days and provides an integration of those in a very prescribed, opinionated manner that can make operations teams successful out of the box in deploying Dockerized distributed apps. And of course, we want to provide all the tooling around it so it's just easy to install, deploy, configure, update, manage in a very secure way the Project Orca tooling. And so where does this fit? If you think about build, ship, and run, and you think, okay, ship, that's clearly the realm of the registries, whether they're hosted in the cloud with Docker Hub Registry or whether they're on-premise with Docker Trusted Registry. Orca owns the run. Orca is an answer for the run. Not that it's a hosted service, but it's taking advantage of your hosts, whether they're on Amazon, in an OpenStack data center, VMware, DigitalOcean, Azure, and Orca is the tooling, the integrated tooling of all the plumbing we've been talking about to manage Dockerized distributed applications that are running on those hosts. And so our demo, concept demo, is going to show how these tools might be used together in an opinionated fashion, and it's going to take advantage of official repos that are hosted up on Docker Hub, as well as private images that are deployed locally on Docker Trusted Registry. As with most innovations, the great ones come from engineers hacking. And so this one's no exception. And so I'm really excited to welcome to the stage the chief hacker of Project Orca, Evan Hazlett. Evan, come on up.
So welcome. Wow, a lot of people. So yeah, as Scott mentioned, there's lots of great products. We have the Docker engine, we have Swarm, we have Compose. We need a Docker way to tie all these together. So what the intent of Project Orca is to give a Docker way to tie all these together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a walkthrough of this concept demo, and hopefully you're impressed as the former demos, as well as the demo guides. Let me log in real quick. So we're going to give a quick walkthrough. So first of all, we're going to start with accounts. So what do we need? We need role-based access control. We need the ability to integrate with authentication systems. So what Orca gives us is that ability. We can look at accounts. We have access control based upon whether or not you want read-only, whether you want to run containers, images, and we get to define what each user gets to do in the system. But not just that, right? We want to really focus on security. We need to be able to have insight into our cluster of what events are happening. We know what a user is running, where containers are happening, what is hitting our API. But not just that. We want our image store. So we want to integrate with the trusted registry so we can see what is living there. Right? We want to be able to quickly see what are our tags, what repositories do we have. We want to quickly also see the size, right? But if we go a level deeper, we not just want to see that. We want to be able to see what is in those images, right? What are the commands that are used to run? So if I want to audit, and look at each one of the layers, what is happening in that layer? I want to get insight. Not to mention, we want to see what platform built it, what was the architecture, what time was it built. We have insight into that. If we move on, we have another great product, which is Docker Swarm. That's one of the revolutionary products, I think, from Docker that ties all these together, allowing all of this great technology to look as a single host and distribute across. So with Orca, we give you the ability to see what are your hosts. We can reboot those. We can upgrade. We can remove them from swarm clusters. We can grow swarm clusters. But not just that. We want to be able to see very much in a Docker way, what images do we have in this store, right? What images are living in my cluster? So very familiar to a Docker images command. We can see quickly what is, very familiar, what is all living across our entire swarm cluster. But not just that, it adds some things. So if we want to search for Redis, we get a contextual search to quickly find, as an operations person, where do my images live? If we go one step deeper, we want to go not just the ability to see what is there, but we want to be able to update. So as developers push code, if we want to do polls, we can pull them and immediately push them all the way across our entire swarm cluster. And obviously, containers. So the container view is a very quick and familiar way. Once again, with Docker PS, we can see this. There's a lot of correlations. We get to see the IDs. We get to see what node this is running on our swarm cluster. We can see the name, the image, when it was created, when it was launched. All right, very familiar. It's a Docker PS. It's very, it correlates directly to that. So it's a very familiar feel. We also want to see details. So as we have running here from one of the official Docker Hub repos, which is the Redis image, we'll go into this. And you can see, we can see details about that container. Very familiar to a Docker inspect. So once again, the theme throughout all this, right, is a Docker, right, the Docker-centric way. We can see environment variables. We can see where that node, where on in the cluster is that running. We can see ports that are exposed. We can quickly see volumes, right, all at your fingertips. An easy way to see what, what ports are exposed, what are my volumes. Not just that, we can also integrate the Docker top, which shows exactly what processes are running inside of that container. And furthermore, are there any processes that shouldn't be running, right? We can quickly see that. As an operations person, I also want to be able to troubleshoot these. One of the commands that Docker gives us is Docker logs. So I can quickly see right here from a quick touch, what are my logs that are running for that container? One of the new features that came in Docker 1.5, which really excited me, was the stats API. So this gives you the ability to see statistics of a container. And as an operations person, I want to quickly see, in real time, what are my stats for this specific Redis container. So Orca gives you the ability to see real-time streaming statistics coming from that container. CPU, memory, network, all in a quick feel right at your fingertips. So another tool that we want to use as operations is, so we've looked into logs, we have seen the stats. We now want to go and look, all right, I've seen there's a problem with this container. I want the ability to actually troubleshoot this and debug it. Now, we could launch another container based upon that image, but it's not really the actual running state. So what also Docker gives us the ability with Docker exec. Docker exec can attach to a container, and we can inspect that and see live in the system as it's running what it's doing. Orca gives us that same ability. So here I can use a Docker exec, and I can jump right inside of a container, and I can see exactly what's going on. I can troubleshoot, I can trace binaries, and so on and so forth. So as Solomon mentioned yesterday, we are creating a toolbox. In Orca, it's very similar. So we've shown this is a good toolbox. This is a good starting point for operations. But what about the developers? We want to bridge together both of these sides. So once again, Docker has a product. We have Docker Compose. There's lots of usage, and it's very good at what it does. So what I have here is a very simple Compose application. So if I put on my developer hat for a moment, as a developer, I want to be able to deploy applications to a cluster. But as the operations side, I don't necessarily want to give my developers full-blown access to my Swarm cluster. I don't want to say, here's the Swarm host point. Now just run, Compose up against that cluster. So what Orca gives you is the ability to create what we call a stack. And this stack is directly from Compose. So the stack in Orca is a meta concept that keeps things like your version of your application, what is the description, as well as source links. So if we create one real quick. And what I'm giving here is just the get URL to this repository, which has my Docker Compose YAML. So now I've created this stack. Now I want to push this out to my cluster. So if you look right now, I have this stack, but it's not ready. So as a developer, I want to be able to push this out and not worry about where it's running or anything else. So let's give this a whirl. Demo gods. So as we deploy this stack, it's doing a compose up, and we can quickly see a very application-centric view. What are my containers just for that stack? But not just that, what is the memory and what is the CPU of that? As a developer, I'm not really concerned with what happens in the entire Swarm cluster. I'm more concerned about what happens directly with my stack. And if we look at this, we can see right now that my application is live and running with that container. Thank you. So this is great, but as the operations side, I'm more inclined to worry about the run. So let's go through a real-world situation here, or somewhat real-world for a demo. So we deployed our application, it's running, we're getting requests. Now, all of a sudden, we get a spike in load. We need the ability to scale our containers so that we can respond to that increased load. So if I switch over to the containers view, I can see my demo container, and I can just run scale. So I'm going to give 4 more containers for that stack. So immediately we deploy. Once again, beauty of containers, they're immediately up and available. And if I look at my application, we can see that the host name at the bottom is rotating back and forth, and that is immediate capacity added to our stack that our users get to enjoy. So this is great, but as a developer, I'm really not concerned with that. I want to update my application, and I want to deploy it. So we're going to make a change real quick over here in GitHub. So in order to respond, refresh this. Oh, not going to let me log in. Demo gods. I have to log in. Oh, I need my phone. 1 second. It's really cool. You got to see this. Two-factor. I'm a good developer. All right, so now we're in. So we're going to do an update. We want to update our application. So in order to respond to the increased load, as a developer, I want to add some caching. So I'm going to deploy a Redis container to handle that. So once again, in my compose, DB, I'm going to deploy an official image from the Docker Hub, Redis, to respond to the increased load. So now I've updated this, I've tested it local, it works great, I need to push this out to production. So as a developer, I jump back over into my stack. I want to deploy. And now we see the Redis container popped right back in. So real-time update. But not just that. The important thing to see here is it did not stomp on the operations side. The operations side had a scaling event that added those more containers to this stack. And as a developer, I did not stomp on them. I updated my application and deployed. But Orca is intelligent enough to know that it does not need to destroy all of those containers. It wants to keep them in place. So as an operations, thank you, developer. This is now fixed our capacity. So I'm going to jump back over here to the container side. I'm going to now remove some capacity. And you can see Orca gives you the ability to multiple select and perform multiple operations on multiple containers. Makes it very easy. So I've removed those. I can still all while see that this is still serving on those 2 instances. And back in the applications view, the developer looks, and we see that it's reduced. So it's focused an application-centric view on my application using the technology in Swarm. So one last thing I would like to say, huge shout out and thank you to all of my friends in Docker family. Without all of their support and all of the teams across the project, there would be no way we could even do this. So a huge round of applause to them, and thank you very much.
So, super early, but our vision is that Project Orca has got everything you need to run. across multiple sites, multiple data centers, multiple clouds. Anywhere you want to deploy your Dockerized distributed app, you can do so with Orca. Is that cool? Now, as we said, this is a concept demo, which means it's super early, and we need your help. Who's willing to help us out with requirements, with feedback, yeah, thank you, thank you. If you want to be on the bleeding edge, literally the bleeding edge, we can do a drill down demo for you. We want to engage in a conversation. To be super clear, we're not going to blog about this. We're not going to put it in docs. Like, this is low, this is on the DL, right? But if you're interested in helping us, please go here, sign up, let us know who you are, and we'd love to reach out and have a conversation with you. All right, it's been a great morning. I just wanted to do a quick wrap. As Ben kicked off, the theme is Docker ready for production. And just to recap a couple quick elements that I hope we were able to share with you today. First, it all starts with a great product that's focused on the user, right? Focused on the technical practitioner, whether it's a developer, an operations system, and DevOps. They've got to have a great experience with the product. We've got to be able to provide services around that and packaged in a way that's easy for them to adopt, easy both from a user experience standpoint, but also economically, as well as how they deploy and manage and update it over time. As you heard Solomon and Ben talk a lot about yesterday, it doesn't happen, though, without an ecosystem. And that goes for the commercial solutions as well. And today, we're so thrilled to see how our partners, Amazon and Booz Allen and IBM and Microsoft, are working with us on the commercial solutions side of the business to bring these products to market with their own solutions and services and products together. But honestly, Docker ready for production doesn't happen without you. Right? It doesn't happen without the users. And this is super important, right? It's like someone's got to go first. Someone's got to have the courage and the vision to step up and say, you know what? What did Chris say? Chris said, let's do it, right? And that takes conviction and belief and fortitude. And then it also takes users coming back and sharing those experiences with all of us. And that's a big part of what DockerCon's about, right? I mean, DockerCon's about the users and sharing our experiences, and whether it's on stage, whether it's the use case track, whether it's the hallway track, whether it's over a beer or two, the user stories that we share is how we're together going to make things better and really move things forward. So I just want to say thank you all for the morning. Thank you for your attention. Have a great day 2 of DockerCon. Thanks a lot.